I'm Elizabeth Shaffer. I'm the council member for Ward 7, where we are seated right here at this moment. A lot of Ward 7 encompasses the central downtown corridor. And of course, as many of you have been paying attention to the news cycle, to city council work, we have kicked off our data center research and regulation discussion. And so we're really excited about that. And today we have this panel of experts that's before us. Michael, I'll just say this too, he stepped out for a phone call. This is technically kind of a Ward 3 and Ward 7 combined community conversation. But tonight, a big thank you to our experts that are here. We have experts in the construction area, the power grid, union representation, and environmental. And so I will introduce each one of those speakers as we begin. But just kind of some understanding of how this is going to work. Tonight's panel is really a discussion. Each of these participants have significant expertise related to data centers. And each is approaching this topic from a different perspective. This is not a debate. The hope is that hearing from all of these speakers, you and I will be better informed about this issue as a whole and be better able to form our own judgments, especially as we kick off this exciting discussion and opportunity that we have as the city of Minneapolis. And of course, I welcome Michael Rainville. Do you have any words before we turn it over to our speakers?
Thank you, Councilmember. I just have words of thanks for the panelists. Thank you so much for giving up your night here on a warm summer night to come down and help us understand. As Elizabeth said, we want to have as much information as possible for when we make our decisions. So thanks to all of our panelists, and thank you, Councilmember Shaffer, for all the good work and the good work of your staff to set this up.
Yep. Absolutely. Kind of what our format will be is each speaker will have about 7 minutes. And after that, we've really reserved about 15 or 20 minutes for questions. You will notice on your tables, and if you didn't get one and you're in these chairs, we have 3x5 cards that as the speakers are talking, and Dave's got some on the back table, we really want you to write those down, and then our aides will come along and collect them, and we'll use them, make sure we don't have any doubled up questions, and try to get through as many of those as we can. Really exciting to be able to have this spearhead of information. To kick us off today, first we have Don Kohlenberger, President of Hightower Initiatives. Thank you, Don, for being here. Don is a construction industry consultant with over 35 years of experience in complex project development in both the Twin Cities and Chicago, specializing in restoration, historical preservation, and repurposing. Local projects that most of us would recognize here have included the Dayton's project, Mayo's Clinic Square Block E, the Baker Center renovation, and Latitude 45 on Washington. In addition to working on many office to housing conversions, Don is also consulting on urban data center efforts in downtown Minneapolis as a front row seat. And so thank you so much for being with us, and kick us off.
Thank you, and thank you all. Can you hear me? Does this work? Great. All right, here we go. Thanks for showing up. Like us, you've got other things to deal with than talking about data centers. I would like to be able to help add clarity and add definition to what urban data centers are that's different than all of the data center things that you hear about. I've been involved for 35 years working on downtown Minneapolis, and I understand what has worked, what doesn't work, and the efforts of us trying to do things like pivot buildings into residential from office or other curative things in downtown. There is a budget deficit that needs to be filled, and in my background, I don't see a lot of industries that are bringing in multi-million dollars of assets from outside of this region to help, with the exception of the possibility of data centers. Let's talk about overall data centers. We are not talking about the kind of data centers that are hitting a lot of news issues. These are not hyperscale, 100 megawatt and larger facilities. When we start thinking about data centers that help downtown Minneapolis, we are talking smaller, 40 megawatts, 50 megawatts, and what does that mean? Well, in some of these smaller data centers, we're not talking about facilities that use water. They're using air-cooled systems, so water is not affected if designed properly. Again, this is time for us to think about what are the right ways of building some of these. Water issues, we've been able to, through technology and through innovation, make that not so much a factor. John is going to be talking about what does urban data centers mean in terms of the electric grid and the beneficial side of it, because there is a positive side to this. We're sensitive to things like emergency generators. They do exist, but how are they piped? How are they exhausted? Where are they located in a way that doesn't affect the living environment? We've got some data centers. There's right now, whether you know, there's a proud history of data centers in Minnesota going back decades and decades. We're controlled data, Cray Research, Honeywell, IBM, on and on. Since the 1980s, this was a mega for data centers. But they've improved. One building that's got a 4 megawatt data center that was built in the 1980s required 75,000 square feet of white space. That same facility now can handle 40 megawatts of power, not changing the size at all, not changing anything on the outside, just updating it, like you would update an office building and doing a renovation in an office building. Some of these existing data centers can be more robust, but more reflective of the market itself. We're going to talk a little bit about moratorium. And what moratorium, the word, that's a very energizing word. Bear in mind, we're in a world economy, and data center investors can look at Minneapolis and look at communities all around the world. And they are looking for a place where business works, where they can have guidance from a municipality saying, we've thought about this and this is an intelligent way of creating requirements that make sense for us, in guidance, not moratorium. Moratorium sounds like thou shall not. Guidance is saying, thou shall. And how can we? And so an investment firm will look at the communities that have that door open where they can come in with predictable outcomes. Everybody wants a predictable outcome if they're going to be putting their investment funds, the management of retirement portfolios. That's what supports the kind of money that's involved in these things. We're all interconnected on this. Helping them helps us. I kind of scattered through a couple of different things, but I do want to let you understand something else. When we talk about data centers, there's different parts to a data center. There is the outdoor equipment, there's the indoor equipment, and then there is the white room. Now, that's important. The white room itself, the white space, that's what you see, the nice, clean, pretty picture, white room with servers and clicking lights. That's important because that is what you figure for an urban data center to be the data center. The rest of it, the back of house things, the pipes, the chillers, the equipment, those type of things kind of get moved into spaces with the rest of the building. When we start talking about a moratorium and how many square feet are affected, 350,000 square feet is...
Sounds like you were discussing how data center square footage.
Yes, we are.
That's a little creepy.
Anyway, I think we need to relook at the amount of square feet a guidance principle would be. It needs to reflect what is the white space. Anyway, I think I filled 7 minutes. I hope I did. really, really looking forward to question and answer. I really hope that we can get to a point of clarity and that we can impart as much truthful knowledge in what it is that we're trying to do. I see it as the main vehicle available to us right now to help address a $33 million budget shortfall that will only get larger next year. I've been involved in office projects, and I've seen, and I cry about how these empty buildings are being devaluated. These are things I've worked on. They're part of my blood and focus over these years. So I want something that can come in and save this city, and it's there, and it's possible, it's doable. And these data centers are located in the basement. They're not screaming outside, out in the open. They're contained. So that's my 7 minutes.
Great, thank you, Don, for those comments. And for those of you that aren't watching city council meetings all day, the moratorium did pass this afternoon. And remind me on the vote, Michael Rainville.
It was very close.
It was close, but it did pass, so for those of you who were wondering. Next up, we have Kathryn Hoffman, CEO of the Minnesota Center for Environmental Advocacy. And it's really great that we can have her with us, very special. With a 50-year history, MCEA is one of Minnesota's most recognized environmental advocacy organizations. Kathryn Hoffman started with MCEA in 2010 and has been its CEO since 2017. She graduated with honors from the University of Minnesota Law School in 2006 and earned a master's degree from public policy from the Humphrey Institute at the same time. The MCEA has recently been successful in obtaining temporary injunctions against several proposed data center developments around the state, and she is well-versed in articulating the environmental concerns related to these projects. Thank you, Kathryn.
All right. Great, well, thank you for that nice introduction, and thanks all for being here. It's a nice full room. This is a big issue. I'm going to adjust this. There we go. Okay. So I want to say a little bit more about who my organization and what we do. And I do want to be clear that the work that we're doing is primarily focused on the hyperscale data centers around the state. So we, yes, as Don, who I just met, Don mentioned, those are 100 megawatts would actually be a pretty small hyperscale data center. A lot of those are, 500. There's even talk of gigawatt data centers around the country. And that is a little different than what we're talking about here in downtown Minneapolis. But we are following the issues here as well. And I think what I want to offer today are some of the concerns that we've seen in other places around data centers as things that I think are important for Minneapolis to consider and ask questions about for individual proposals going forward. So my organization is an environmental law nonprofit. I have 30 employees, 11 of them are litigators. And as an environmental law organization, we work on lots of different stuff. We work on boundary waters and mining. We work on pipelines. We work on clean energy. We work on agricultural water pollution. But lately, we work a lot on data centers because this is a thing that's coming up all across the state. And we do have a series of lawsuits. All of those lawsuits are around transparency and secrecy. And that's the first thing I want to mention here today. That's, I think, an important thing to consider in these proposals. And again, I'm not saying that any particular proposal in Minneapolis has this problem. It's just a question that, as residents, I think will want to ask. So one of the issues that we see is that often the data center proposals move forward under a cloak of secrecy. Often local government officials will sign non-disclosure agreements that forbids them from saying really anything about the project, what it is, that it's a data center, how much energy it uses, how much water it might use, any details that residents might be interested in. And what's more, we see the environmental studies studies happen while these non-disclosure agreements are in effect. And so what that means is that none of those details make it into an environmental study. Well, it's very hard to do a good environmental study if you can't say what it is or how much resources it would use. That's a pretty poor document. And in our lawsuits, what we're finding is that courts are agreeing with us. We are starting to see courts turn these studies back and say, hey, this really doesn't meet our standards in Minnesota and you have to do better. So we certainly want to avoid those secrecy issues, make sure that there is transparency around what's being proposed, good, robust environmental studies, lack of non-disclosure agreements, certainly known as non-disclosure agreements in place once any studies start, because at that point, the point is to share information, not to hide it. So that's a good first thing to think about. Some other concerns that we see are, of course, the energy use. Now, again, the energy use is on a different scale in these data centers that are being proposed in Minneapolis. 40 or 50 megawatts is not 500 megawatts. But 40 or 50 megawatts is still a pretty good chunk of energy. And I think as probably people are aware at this point, we do have a goal in Minnesota, a state law, that requires us to be 100% carbon free in our utility provided electricity by 2040. Right now, we're doing pretty well with that. We are upwards of 50% on our carbon free, higher in the case of some of our utilities, and it's good progress. But also, electricity demand has been pretty flat for the last 20 or so years. And that's not going to be the case anymore as these data centers come in. It's not only data centers, other things are driving up demand, but that's a big one. So one good question to ask is, will the increased energy demand from this data center move us closer to our clean energy goals or further away? Are we going to power it with gas, or are we going to power it with clean energy? And even go so far as I think it'd be reasonable to say, if you're going to use 40, 50 megawatts of power, you should be making investments in clean energy equivalent to that. And of course, you have a cumulative effect as well. It probably won't just be one 40 megawatt data center. You'll probably have multiple. So there's the question of the multiple effects. Water is a big issue around the state. I suspect that's probably not a big issue with these smaller data centers, but I think it's a good thing to ask, is it's going to be air-cooled or water-cooled. There's not necessarily a right or wrong answer here, to be honest. They just trade off, because you got to cool it. So either it's using water resources, and that has one kind of impact, or it's using air cooling, and that's a different kind of impact, so which is using more electricity. So it's really just understanding what the choices are and which one makes sense under that circumstance. If it is water cooled, it's probably using municipal water. And so that's a good question to ask as well. Is it going to cause issues for Minneapolis's water resources, for its the rates that folks are paying, water rates, any of that? Again, I don't know that that's an issue here. I'm just raising things that I think are good inquiries for the city. Finally, you have some local impacts. So I do want to take a moment and talk about noise. So for the large hyperscalers, there's a series of lawsuits. These aren't ours, but they're happening around the country around noise. The state has some standards around noise. It's 50 decibels at night, 60 decibels during the day. However, the issue with data centers is a little different. It's low frequency noise. Kind of sounds like you're living near a subwoofer, like someone with their bass way up. Again, like bigger problem with bigger facilities, but these are in proximity to, other businesses, potentially condominiums or apartments. It's good to ask the question, what are the noise effects? And this one I really want to emphasize, because in my conversations with developers, these have been the conversations where it feels like the developers or the project proposals know the least. They really don't fully know. I don't know that they have good ideas of how we measure this or how we prevent it, because normal noise solutions don't work that great for the low decibel, right? Like you think of insulation and things like that. They don't work that great for low decibel. I think it's really good to ask some questions here about, like, how are we measuring that? Do we have ways of measuring that? And that are there standards that we can impose that are outside of the state standards? Because the state standards really are not going to address this problem, and you are close to other people. Finally, I do want to say that be wary of voluntary-only strategies, right? You're going to have folks who come in and they say, look, we're doing a good job. And that's great. Like, I don't want to take anything away from those developers. I think that's wonderful when they make investments and want to do good things. But that is not an enforceable requirement for the city of Minneapolis. Like, I've been an environmental lawyer for 16 years, and I've heard many corporations make many wonderful promises. And I appreciate those, and I will tell you they aren't worth anything to me unless they are in a permit document or an enforceable contract. And so that's a thing I think you should all be looking out for as well, is it's not good enough to have somebody come in and say, look, we want to do this, and that's great. Put it in the permit, put it in the contract, make it enforceable. Because if they decide later that really wasn't such a great investment, or they change tactics, then the city will have no way of doing anything about that. That press release or that statement at the city council is not something you can take to court. That's my overview. Thanks. I'm excited for your questions.
Well, thank you, Kathryn. That's really, both of you have raised a lot of questions in my mind already, but we're going to keep going through the list here and write your questions down as they come to mind. Next up, we have John Marshall, Regional Vice President for Xcel Energy. Many of the concerns related to data centers are related to power demand and supply. With over 25 years of executive experience, John has a deep knowledge of all aspects of the company's operations, with a particular focus on clean energy goals, sustainability, and community partnerships. John has also been involved in the larger downtown business community, and last year, congratulations, was elected president of the Minneapolis Downtown Council and Improvement District. While John has spent most of his career in the private sector, he started out on the public side, working as a legislative aide for Ward 3 of the St. Paul City Council. So thanks for being with us, John, and making the time.
Thanks, Councilmember. And again, thank you for pulling this together. Thank you, everybody, for coming out tonight. Really appreciate it. Appreciate the opportunity to talk to you today from the vantage point of Xcel Energy. I think I'm guessing most folks in this room know Xcel Energy. You know, its original roots go back to 1909, right here in Minneapolis. It was the old Northern States Power Company. Started on the river with a hydro facility powering the old streetcars, and here we are today, 2026. Xcel Energy, serving portions of 8 states. Is an investor-owned utility, and we're vertically integrated, meaning we have generation fleets, so our power plants. We have portions of the transmission grid across the country, as well as the distribution system. The distribution system is what powers downtown Minneapolis and is kind of the subject matter of tonight with respect to data centers. Fundamentally, Xcel Energy's role is to reliably, safely, and affordably serve all of our customers. Whether it's a single-family home, an apartment complex, a manufacturer, a Target store, a U.S. Bank Stadium, or a data center, serve customers reliably and make sure that we are protecting all customers to ensure they're receiving reliable energy. It's important, as well as we're talking about data centers, for you all to hear from your utility and understand that we take that mission and that obligation very, very seriously. It is also important for you to understand that we plan for growth many, many years ahead of time. We have integrated systems plans. We have plans that look many years out at the prospect of growth coming onto our system. And the system is built out from a generation standpoint, the power plants, the transmission grid, as well as the distribution system to take on future economic opportunities when they come to the cities that we serve. So we're always planning many, many years ahead. When we are taking on a new customer, whether again it's a residential or a multifamily development or a data center, we have really comprehensive, rigorous processes where we work with those customers to understand how much electricity do you need, how much power, when, what is your load factor, meaning how much are you going to use that power in a given year, and we analyze that against the rest of the system, doing things like system impact studies to make certain that we have enough power to provide. Also, it's going to cost those customers to interconnect. What costs are those, and ensuring that the rest of our customers are not paying for those costs. Whether you're a data center or a new Target store or a mixed family, multifamily developer, you need to pay for those costs to interconnect into our system. And we have regulations and tariffs and things in place to ensure that our customers are not subsidizing for data centers or other large loads that come in. So I did want to assure folks from your utilities perspective, we are very much looking out for our customers. We are regulated by the Minnesota Public Utilities Commission to ensure that we have your best protections in mind. We have been around a long time and we intend to be around a long time. And taking on this kind of new adventure of data centers is an interesting one because they are spurring up quite a bit of concern and fear. Fully understand that. But from a utility standpoint, please know that we are looking at these carefully and cautiously and arranging agreements with these data centers to ensure that the grid will be reliable, your lights will stay on, and there's also opportunity that can benefit the rest of the customers. The downtown grid has a bunch of fixed asset costs in terms of infrastructure, in terms of the cost to continue to operate that. And when you increase the usage, like a data center or a US Bank Stadium or anybody, to share in those fixed costs, there are financial benefits for the rest of the customers that can help bring downward pressure on rates going forward. So there are values there that you can see for the rest of the customer base. For the city themselves, we have an agreement in place with the city of Minneapolis called a franchise agreement. We have those with many cities that we serve across the state of Minnesota. A portion of that agreement is there's something called a franchise fee. Franchise fee is based on the percentage of gross revenue. So across the entire city of Minneapolis, as we see increases in sales, whether it's from a data center or economic development in a housing complex, et cetera, as that increases, the city does receive portions of that via franchise fees. Those are great additional dollars as you contemplate the city's budget concerns, et cetera. So there are additional values there. With respect to sustainability, I do want to note Xcel Energy has really been leading the clean energy transition in the United States for many, many years. Across our 8 states, we've been making various investments for many years on clean energy. We've been the #1 wind energy provider for nearly 20 years, and we continue to make clean energy investments in wind, in long-duration battery storage, in solar. We are ending our coal operations company-wide by 2030. Right now in Minnesota, our energy mix is sitting at about 69% carbon-free. We have absolute plans to achieve Minnesota state law by 2040, hopefully ahead of time, knock on wood. The current plans we have in place for investments should get us to about 88% carbon-free by 2030, which is just, I can't believe, 4 short years away. And so when you think about data centers and their consumption of electricity, there's a lot of benefits, including siting them in an area and siting them in a service territory like Xcel Energy that has made tremendous clean energy investments. They are going to be built around this country. I think we all know that. Landing them in Xcel Energy territory to meet a lot of those benefits, including the sustainability benefits, I think are some considerations of value. And again, at the end of the day, I just, again, want to assure folks, we take the reliability of our grid seriously, the protection of our customers and affordability very, very seriously. So I appreciate the opportunity to answer questions tonight and provide some perspective from Xcel Energy. So thank you.
Thank you, John.
Yeah.
That was very informative. Next up, we have Dan McConnell, Business Manager for the Minneapolis Building and Trades Council, Construction Trades Council. Data center construction is specialized and requires highly skilled workers, most, if not all of whom, come from our local trade unions. Dan McConnell grew up in Minneapolis, is a 3rd-generation graduate of Roosevelt High School, and graduated from the Electrical Construction Program at Dunwoody. He joined IBEW Local 292 in 1988, and spent 7 years working in the field before becoming the local's political director in 2005. In 2011, he became business manager of the Minneapolis Building and Trades Council. And in 2023, he was also elected the president of the Minnesota State Building and Construction Trades Council. Thank you, Dan, for being with us.
Well, thank you, Councilmember. Thanks for having me. As Councilmember said, my name is Dan McConnell. I'm a resident of the 12th Ward and a longtime resident of the city of Minneapolis, almost all my life. So one thing I want to point out that's a little different from the labor perspective, we had the National AFL-CIO convention was here in Minneapolis, coincidentally, a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago, and they had vigorous debate leading up to that convention amongst the affiliates of the AFL-CIO around data centers and smart growth. They came out with what they called Resolution 7 that passed unanimously. And it acknowledges that there's both opportunities and legitimate concerns surrounding these projects. And that the labor movement took a position saying that we aren't saying build these at any cost. We're saying that they need to be built responsibly. But I think it's important to note that they did not call for a moratorium. We're absolutely against moratoriums. As Don mentioned, we're not talking about hyperscale data centers in the city of Minneapolis. There's just not enough room for a hyperscale data center in the city of Minneapolis. Some of the stuff I've seen online and some of the conversation I've seen about data centers seems a little bit alarmist in my view. But we're talking about vacant, underutilized buildings in the city of Minneapolis. If you look at just up the street, there's the old American Express Tower, that 35-story building that just sold for $6 million a year ago. And then right behind us, we've got the Sleep Number store, which is maybe 8 stories? 8 stories, yeah. That sold for $235 million. And you can think about our taxes that we pay in the city of Minneapolis. I want more $200 million commercial properties on the tax rolls to subsidize the amount of property tax that I pay on my modest home in South Minneapolis. So we need that, right? To the council members' point about, Don's point about tax revenue, right? The property rolls, the higher the value of the entire city, the higher tax value, the less everybody pays. So what else? And so, as the council member mentioned, also construction careers, obviously, the concern about the number of jobs that these things create. I can tell you the construction of a hyperscale data center, which again, we're not talking here, the amount of jobs that the members of the Minnesota Building Trades have seen in building this one hyperscale data center down in Rosemont has been an incredible amount of boost to our economy. It was the single largest project that our sister local in St. Paul has ever seen in their 100-and-some-year history. So obviously that gets our attention, right? And we want to see more jobs, right, for our members, right? That's our own self-interest. But again, we want to see these things built right. I happen to know that there's a concern about moratoriums, as one of the other panelists mentioned. The city of Minneapolis, or non-disclosure agreements, that the city of Minneapolis does not do non-disclosure agreements. That's city policy. The concern that they create only temporary jobs, I would say that every job in construction is temporary, right? If you want us to build you a house, you don't want it to go on forever, right? It needs to be done, and then we know how to go build the next thing. We built a stadium, we want to build a new hospital, HCMC is struggling, we need more tax base to pay for some of these things. We want to build another light rail line, we want to build more housing, we need affordable housing in our city. We've got an unhoused population that needs more city resources to help them. We also, the council member mentioned, I went through an apprenticeship program. We want more people in the city to have the same opportunity that I had, right? I grew up here, I went to Roosevelt High School, didn't know what I wanted to do. My dad was in construction, he told me he should get into construction. My joke is I'm glad I wasn't Evel Knievel's son, because I didn't want it to break every bone in my body. But he finally convinced me that I should get into construction. And it's worked well for me, right? Like, I've made a middle-class life and enjoy living in the city and want to keep that going here. I want the next generation to have those same opportunities. My daughter says she's never getting a construction. I said, good luck. I told my kid to have that the same thing. So good luck to you. But let's talk a little more about the AFL-CIO framework. What we've called for is to make sure that these things are built with union labor, right? That we have registered apprenticeships, strong environmental standards, energy efficiency, conservation of water. We want to make sure that the companies pay their fair share. As John mentioned, the more people on the grid, it spreads out the cost for the infrastructure, right? And my understanding in some of the discussions in southern Minnesota around the data centers is those data center developers are paying for upgrades that the companies would have had to do, or that the Xcel would have had to do without that being there, right? That's taking that cost off of the ratepayers. We're also looking at that, you're also going to see that doing it in Minnesota, it's going to help the transition to more clean energy. They're going to pay those costs are going to get passed on to those customers to build more clean energy. If we build this in North Dakota, these things are going to get powered by coal, right? Coal, North Dakota, Great River Energy sold their coal plant. North Dakota bought it and is repurposing it and trying to sell this energy to customers, right? They need customers to sell this dirty coal power to, and they need data centers. They would love to have these projects in North Dakota. Guess what? That combustion gases and those particulates come to Minnesota. So where would we rather have these things? Would we have them powered by solar and wind and carbon-free energy in Minnesota, which we're going to reach by 2040? This is going to help us get there. So I think the opportunity here is really an interesting opportunity. Obviously, I have a unique perspective being an electrician and kind of a tech guy. I like playing with computers. We all have computers. See, everybody in this room, I think, has a computer in their hand. We think this is a path to the future. We're going to see more of this development, and we want to see it done properly. So thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. Can we give our panelists a round of applause? As Marty's bringing up the questions here, Michael and I will just kind of run through them. And I guess I just want to give you a brief update before we jump into the questions. I have spearheaded the regulation resolution working with staff, and also my partner, also Council Member Chowdhury, is working with me on this to have kind of all of us, at the table in this discussion. And I can tell you in the 2 meetings that we've had already that I feel like there is some consensus building going on, that we have some good ideas that are already bubbling up about multi-use and things like that can really, and incentives to drive some of our climate goals that we heard from Kathryn. So I think we're going to have some exciting discussions ahead. This is just the beginning of all this discussion, right? There'll be a multi-stage process with lots of community engagement, 60 days of community engagement over the summer, with a target goal of having this regulation wrapped up and approved by maybe mid-November. So we're excited about the train is coming out of the station, and we just wanted to set the table for you this evening around some of these ideas to start thinking about. And Michael, do you want to pick one to read first?
Thanks, Liz. I will. I'll let you look over these here. There's 3 great questions there. The first question I really have is for John here, and it's how feasible is it to power upcoming data centers from new renewable power, so that we don't backtrack on the 100% carbon-free electricity goal that Xcel and everybody agreed to in the clean energy protocol, which we have already addressed, the city voted to.
Sure, absolutely. So let's back up and just generally talk about the function of the grid, okay? Xcel Energy owns a number of power plants, and we have a generation fleet that we are continuing to increase in its carbon reductions, right? Like I mentioned, we are getting out of coal and retiring our coal fleet by 2030, continuing to make more investments in wind energy. We do have 2 nuclear plants in Minnesota that provide a significant amount of carbon-free electricity. Those plants run tremendously. We also have firm natural gas or firm dispatchable generation. Those plants run when the wind is not blowing. A little fact about wind, we are able to predict wind energy about 24 hours ahead of time with about a 90% accuracy. So we really do know when the wind is going to blow, and some days we'll have 500 megawatts of wind on, some days we'll have 5,000. And so we always have the nukes running. Winds are must-run sources, and as we track out the consumption of all that all that generation of electricity throughout the year, we're going to continue getting closer and closer to our goals. Again, sitting today, that mix is at 69% carbon-free, and will be at 88% carbon-free by 2030 as we continue to implement our investment plans in more generation of solar, of wind, of long-duration storage battery. That is the generation fleet. It flows through our transmission grid and comes into the distribution system. The distribution system has excess capacity. There is room to add load. There is room to add load for data centers, small data centers that we're talking about here, or urban data centers, to use that load, spread those fixed assets across. So those aren't really impacting at that scale the existing generation fleet that we have right now. They're taking advantage of that clean generation that exists today. It would not backtrack us or delay us in getting to that 100% goal by 2040. So there's not really an impact. I hope that helps.
Great. And Kathryn, I think, wanted to answer this
Yeah,
question
please.
too, about how feasible is it around renewable power for our city's goals?
Yeah, I mean, I don't really, thank you. I don't really disagree with what John is saying. I think, first of all, Xcel is a model in terms of the clean energy resources. When I go to, conferences with other environmental lawyers from around the country, they know about Xcel and they wish they had Xcel too. And Xcel tends to be a partner with us. We don't agree on everything, but it's not an adversarial relationship. I do want to say that there are folks who talk about our 2040 clean energy law like it's a magic wand, right? Like it's, we're automatically get there. And I want to be clear that that's not how that works, right? It takes work, it takes advocacy, and there are some off-ramps. And in particular, it is possible to comply with our 2040 law by building a gas plant and then buying renewable energy credits elsewhere. Now, I don't think Xcel wants to do that, and I think they'll be a partner with us in avoiding that scenario. Very much so, but it is legal and it is available off ramp. And so what I want people to hear is that I think that Xcel is going to want to do this with clean energy, but I also want you to hear that it's not a slam dunk and that we still need to make sure that we are rigorously looking at the system every step of the way and holding the data center developers accountable to make sure that they're making the investments in the utility so that the clean energy is there for them.
Our next question is around the Public Utilities Commission, and so I will probably shoot this back down to John as well. Are the ratepayer protections that the Public Utilities Commission put in place enough to prevent the utilities from overcharging captive customers for the grid infrastructure improvements? And just speak more generally too to where they are in that process of regulation. I listened into one very long meeting about a month ago that was very interesting, but at that moment in time it felt like there were regulations still being set. So if you could speak a little bit to,
Sure.
how are the PUC regulations strong enough to protect customers, and then where are we at in that process?
Absolutely. Yes, the PUC regulations are very much strong enough to protect customers. There are customer classes out there. There is residential, there's commercial, there's industrial. What you were referencing that has been discussed lately, that the commission recently ruled on, is what's called a large or a super large load tariff. This was intended to, I think, set some boundaries for incoming super large loads like the hyperscale data centers, and are basically trying to address incoming large loads over 100 megawatts and establish some guardrails and some obligations from these incoming data centers to understand you need to pay for X, Y, and Z, and here are your expectations if you want to come into Minnesota and you want to serve in a regulated utilities territory like Xcel or like Minnesota Power or like Otter Tail, or Dakota County Electric, which is the regulated utilities in Minnesota. That super large tariff doesn't affect the size of the data centers that are being talked about here in downtown Minneapolis, but we do have existing rates. We do have existing boundaries that obligate when we work with those customers to ensure they're paying for every last nickel of the infrastructure that they need when they come online. And then again, don't forget the system balancing to make sure that we have reliable power. Yes, they're paying their fair share, and no, we are not risking reliability for anybody else, as there is existing capacity in downtown Minneapolis to bring on a data center right now, and that's, I hope that answers that question.
Michael, would you like to take one, or you want me to ask another one?
No, I want to take one. I want to break from those because I want you and I to answer this. Break
Sure.
from the.
Sure.
It's a very good question, and it's an easy answer for us. How can the people combat the use of NDAs and make sure they are not able to operate in secret? So Elizabeth and I can speak to Minneapolis here, and I'll jump in on this.
Go ahead.
This came up in our staff meeting about what to reassure everybody as we go through the checklist. And we want to, right now, we do not do that, but it's not codified. And so we would work with our attorneys to make sure that that is indeed a fact, that us on the city council cannot sign an NDA. Elizabeth, would you?
I think that's still in process, and actually, we have some CPED folks in the back. They're happy to stand up and answer that if you'd like, Meg.
Not to put you on the spot.
I do see a member of our city attorney's office also.
Oh, yes, Joel.
Let's
Joel.
pass it around. Yeah, Joel.
I was uncertain where that conversation landed, but if you have any insights that we can share, please feel free.
Everything I've heard, the city has no contemplation of utilizing NDAs in this context whatsoever, and we're willing to work with the council to make sure that's the case. First and foremost, any such agreement would have to be authorized by the city council.
Yes.
And so it lies within your powers, and
Yes.
everything I've heard from every council member is that it's not something that's on the plate.
Right. Thank you for that expert opinion. I think this one might be kind of a nice one to shoot back to Don and then possibly Michael and I, but how could data centers fit into a vibrant downtown? I fear data centers would make downtown less dense with reasons not to come shop, play, or otherwise visit.
That is a nice question. I'm happy to answer that. So some data centers can be located in the basements of some of the office buildings, for example. The best place for urban data centers are in basements. For weight consideration, some of the things that are accretive to that is the heat and cooling that's part and parcel of the operation of a data center. When connected to district energy, the Cordia system can buy and sell waste energy and waste heat and help heat the building itself in the wintertime. So there's a symbiotic relationship with thermal gain, in those situations. So that's one. Two, I mentioned that they're in the basement. They're in the basement. They're not going to affect the outside area. So one of the facilities that I'm deeply involved with right now, the data center is completely in the basement, and the environment above grade will still be an office building, and you won't notice any of that. So I think that's helpful. The other thing is that when located in a otherwise struggling office building, it provides the financial foundation that it needs in order for it to stabilize as a financial instrument. Some of these buildings are, the ownership are paying $1.5 million to $1.5 million every single month just to keep the building operating at a deficit. This eliminates that problem. That frees up capital for them to start making investments like restaurants on street level and to make conversions to residential now feasibly possible. It is what I've always referred to as the extra layer, the necessary layer to the wedding cake. Many of these solutions for these buildings need residential, yes. They need office space, yes. They need retail, yes. But they need in the basement, in the worst possible part, the less appealing part of the building, a small data center.
Great, thank you.
So thank you, Don. The one thing that really excites me about this opportunity, and we all have to discuss this and vet it through, but with the affordable housing shortage, we have so many buildings downtown that can be converted into housing. So think of something like the grain exchange, lumber exchange. Those older buildings adapt very economically. And if you work with our district energy system, Cordia, to capture that heat, and that can do some cost savings, make it even affordable. We can house people at a lot faster rate utilizing our district energy, as well as helping our environment.
Great, thank you. I think I would have just chimed in on some of the things that have been mentioned. Let's get another question going here. What is the market for less than 350K square feet data centers? What is the sweet spot that if we were to pursue a very thoughtful process around small data centers, what would be the average size maybe that we might anticipate?
Another nice question. No, we've studied a lot of this, and a lot of it has to respond to the marketplace, the type of users that are out there. Data centers range from 1 megawatt to 15 megawatts to potentially 90 megawatts, all within that slot that keeps it underneath that tariff, makes it feasible from a square footage standpoint. 350,000 square feet is not a truly correct number, I believe, and this is only my opinion, that it should be less than that to correspond with the megawatts per square foot. So think about 175,000 square feet of white space, because we talk about white space, not the whole building. 350,000 square feet doesn't mean a whole building, that inside of which we're only putting a 20 megawatt facility. That doesn't make sense. So we can have a 10 megawatt facility in the basement of a building that has an available 25 to 30,000 square feet in the basement. That can happen. That's basically a range.
Okay, so I have a question for you, Dan. What plans does the city have to guarantee job safety and security under construction? It's really, we do have city inspectors, but I think you're best suited to talk about job safety and security both during and after construction.
After construction, not under.
I did say, I'm sorry if I didn't enunciate, I did read that. Thank you.
But job safety and security after construction?
Yes.
I mean, typically what we see after construction is done is that there's an ongoing maintenance and renewal of those projects, right? I mean, obviously we know that phone, every couple of years you get a new phone, right? Like every couple of years your computer goes obsolete. Same thing with the data centers, right? There's always going to be continual upgrades and refurbishment of these things. Our experience has been good as far as continuing to see ongoing jobs. Obviously the scale is smaller because you're not building a whole building, you're just moving stuff around inside an existing building, but we've had really good experiences with a lot of the data center customers.
And I can just add to the person who asked the question, I did tour the Sleep Number building, and the security there is very high level. It has to be, and it will be, and as well as providing some really good paying jobs.
With all the money that the city, I love the question, this positivity here, with all the money the city will receive from data centers, our property taxes for all homeowners and the effect of our rents should drastically go down or be eliminated, correct? I'm not sure. We don't have the city's finance director here tonight, but
this reminds me of who was the candidate of governor that wanted to run the state fair year round, right?
Oh, yeah. There's lots of optimism, obviously, that once we could bring some of the commercial valuation up on some of these downtown spaces, that it would relieve some of the downward pressure that apartment owners and homeowners have felt in years after years of, well, almost 10 years now of property tax increases. I'm not sure they're going to be eliminated, but I think it would start us trending in the right direction. So that's just a quick answer. Do you have, Michael?
Sure. To give you a more detailed answer, so I've done a lot of research with our budget director and our assessor. The valuations of these empty buildings in downtown has dropped so much since '21 that this year alone, we're out $53 million. Last year was about $50 million. The city has to run itself, so that $53 million has to be picked up by every renter and homeowner in the city. And then, if you add to it the $265 million that the federal government gave us to recover from COVID, that money's all gone too. It had to be spent by '24. So we are facing a real budget crisis. And this is not the silver bullet to answer it, but it's part of it. And as Elizabeth says, it's our chance to start turning the city around and increasing the valuations of these downtown buildings. And thus take the stress off every renter and every homeowner in the city.
Yeah, the research that I've done on it, the downtown commercial real estate values have plummeted 45% from 2021 to 2026. And what that means is the percentage of the overall amount of funding that's necessary in taxation has moved to 55.6% onto residential. As before, it used to be more carried by commercial.
Correct.
So the other thing too, if we could wave a magic wand and say the solution is conversion of office buildings to residential, you'd still have a significant deficit because the tax rate is different as well. So data centers pay the highest rate level with the highest amount of asset value.
Yeah, and just, it's about 2.5, commercial pays about 2.5 compared to what residential pays if it was for one. So it's a little more than double the rate, the property tax.
We have time for another one.
Yeah, let's just, did you seek one out here or just grab one here?
Here's an environmental one.
Sure.
Maybe we could ask our environmental attorney. Where would data center exhaust vent? Would it affect street noise or noise in adjacent? And we're talking about urban data centers here, not rural. Do you have a thought on that? Where the exhaust would go and how street noise and noise in adjacent buildings would be affected?
I think that's a question you should be asking the developers. I mean, ideally they're exhausting out the top. Ideally they're running those backup generators as little as possible because those are a source of greenhouse gases as well as particulate matter and local air pollution. The noise is from the equipment and the associated servers itself. And so I think the question of what's the perimeter of where you want to do testing and what you're testing for is something that, we should be asking, and in particular for those low frequencies. So, Don's talking about in the basement, and so it may be possible to, avoid that going out into the street, for example, but those are, things that we'd want to, I think you'd want to set up some parameters around and some requirements around in terms of those low frequency decibels in particular.
So you had mentioned a while ago about, don't trust voluntary only strategy. That is completely what developers are sensitive to. Nobody wants a day two problem. The facilities that I'm involved with, the emergency generators are in the basement. They're 2 floors underground. The exhaust of it goes through the top of the roof. The use of it is only for the maintenance of the facility equipment itself. When was the last time you saw an outright blackout in downtown Minneapolis? The amount of power and the stability of it is profound. There's a reason why, from an electrical standpoint, emergency generator standpoint, downtown data centers, it does make sense, but the developers are sensitive to those type of things. You guys have toured the Sleep Number facility. Did you hear anything outside?
None.
Zero.
No, we actually had difficulty. They have even sound barriers where the processing room was happening, even in the hallway outside the processing room. When you enter the processing room, and it's amazing. The technology is quite amazing to behold, but you could not hear anything until you entered the processing room.
Was there a city requirement or an observatory group saying that that was necessary to make it that way?
I would need to refer back to.
I can say, no, there wasn't.
Okay, all right, thank you. The other thing I would say is on the roof, the generators were enclosed in a noise protection box.
Voluntarily.
Yes, voluntarily. And they had actually had people down on the street trying to listen for this low volume noise, you know, because it was on the 5th floor, 6th floor, 6 and 7. And we could not hear anything from the street, and they were processing while we were doing our tour. But I think we're going to need to wrap it up. I want to be, you know, conscious of everyone's time. Please feel free to interact a little bit with these experts. We don't have this room for very much longer, but I really thank you for coming out. And please know that you can reach out to the Ward 7 office, Ward 3 office, and we would love to continue to answer your questions and to continue this dialogue that we've started tonight. And thank you again for all of you to share your time.
And please leave here knowing that Elizabeth and I are available as we go through this process. This is a very serious ordinance that we're taking up. It means a lot to our community, and we know that, and we will act accordingly.
And we're going to read the questions, so we're going to save them. Thanks.